Hi, everyone. Ruthie Renae with Quantum Field Trips, and I'm here in my bedroom today displaying my giant picture of the love of my life and I, because today I'm talking with Lindsay Cluff, and she is a relationship coach and specialist. And so I thought it would be fitting to share my relationship with you. Lindsay, I'm so excited that you're here with me today because my goodness, relationships is everything. We have our relationships with time, money, our body, our God, our spouse or significant other, our children, finance, everything. And so when we talk about relationship coaching, look at me just jumping ahead. Before we go there, tell us a little bit about yourself. I know you're a great coach and a loving wife and mother, and tell us a little bit about you and how you came to do what you're doing.
Okay. Well, first of all, my Instagram handle is Life Coaching with Linz. Other than that, I'm just Lindsay Cluff Coaching. But I started with relationship coaching. This is a story near and dear to my heart. More than a few years ago, my husband and I hit a really rocky patch in our marriage, and I went down the road of an emotional affair. And so it was about the same time that I was kind of going down that slippery slope that I found Jody Moore. And so I felt like that was divine intervention for me. And I listened to her podcast weekly, and I found it so profound that each week it was like something that was teaching me on how to get myself out of an emotional affair. At first I was kind of in denial about it, and then I recognized that how inappropriate it was getting, but I was also kind of in a situation where I didn't really know how to get myself out of it. I just felt really stuck. I just felt like I was in this hole, and it was through coaching that I was able to navigate that and find the courage to talk to my husband and the relationship and pull myself out of that. And it wasn't like happily ever after, right? Like I had to deal with all the consequences. It was super brutal. And it brought up a lot of trauma for me from my childhood. It brought up marital traumas that I had dealt with. My awesome, amazing husband had also been struggling to get rid of using pornography as his buffer. And so I was kind of dealing with a lot of self-worth issues, and I was making it mean that I wasn't good enough for him, when it was him that was hurting, and he was trying to just not feel pain anymore or discouragement or any of that stuff. So he was using the pornography. So we ended up doing therapy and coaching and to help me grow out of that. And I would say that the therapy was okay, but it actually kind of caused me a lot of turmoil. When I did personal therapy one-on-one, it was fine. But when we did marriage couples therapy, I had a lot of issues with it because my therapist was pretty standard marriage therapist, where they just really focus on the Gottman 5 love languages, stuff like that. In therapy, they were teaching me that it was my job to make Parker happy. And so then I was going home, and I knew that it wasn't my job to make Parker happy. It was his job to make him happy. But I was still wanting to try because I love him. I want to show up for him. But when I was trying to make him happy, it wasn't working. And it was super frustrating and disheartening. And I didn't know what was going wrong. I felt like he was like speaking Arabic and I was speaking Spanish, and like we just like could not communicate and make each other happy. And so eventually I was like, okay, like how do I take the things that I've learned from therapy and apply them to the things that I've learned in coaching and create a way for like relationships to heal, for husbands and wives to communicate, for them to understand each other better, while avoiding the conflicting like teachings that sometimes they have and the messy drama that like I went through to try and like figure that out.
Right. Wow. Well, that's a so much just in your story. Thank you for being so vulnerable and sharing some of the raw details. And most people don't. First, just to like, I don't know if people have recognized this. Most people, especially therapists, coaches, they won't like go down the dirty road of oh, I've been there, other than saying, oh, I've been there. So to hear you say, yeah, this is the trajectory I was going on, because we know how emotional affairs will turn into more sometimes if you don't catch it. And I've been there too. It's tricky, especially when you're young, newlywed, even if you're older, when you're first together in a relationship and that pain comes up. It's going to come up. And what do we do when there's pain? We want to run away from it. So you had your way of buffering, your husband had his way of buffering. And who knew that by going through these experiences and overcoming them, you find your new job, your passion, and your how you can take, it's the law of the freeway, right? You've already navigated around all those ruts and holes in the road. So now the people behind you can learn from you and not like get stuck. So that's awesome. So glad that you found your way here. And for other people, you've probably figured out Jody Moore is a life coach, and she also has a podcast, Better Than Happy. And that's how Lindsay and I have connected, because I'm a longtime follower of Jody and done different programs as well. And so when I heard Lindsay, I was just like, oh my gosh, she's just so cute and so real, and love what she's doing. So that's why I had to have her on. Okay. So all of that being said, I'm curious, because you touched on in your story of how you got from there to here, that you had a lot of childhood things come up, and you hit triggers, and we know triggers are from they're just data, just something our body's saying, oh, there's this thing here that we still haven't resolved. And so there is a lot of subconscious programming going on in any person, but you felt that in your relationship and didn't quite know what to do with it until you got the therapy and the coaching. And so now I'm just curious, when you're working with couples, or do you work with couples or just the women?
Oh,
Both. Okay. When you're working with couples, how much would you say of their issues end up being subconscious programmings that they need to see clearly?
probably like 90%.
That's what I thought. That's what I find too in my work.
Yeah.
That makes sense. So if I were feeling right now, if I was watching and thinking, oh my gosh, I'm there. Maybe I need some help from Lindsay. What would I expect to find when I reach out to work with you? What kind of things do you do?
So my main program is a 13-week course. Well, not really a course, it's more of a program where you and your spouse doesn't have to do it, but it's better if they can, will come in, and each one of you gets like a half an hour of individual time to work with me on your own thoughts and feelings. And then, so that's a total of 1 hour a week for that, but each spouse will get a half an hour. And then we'll come together for 1 hour during that same week. And I have like a list of topics that I go in order. For example, some of the topics that we talk about are boundaries in a relationship and how they're totally appropriate. We really talk about habits and buffering and creating the life that we want and how to feel our emotions. We talk about sex and creating desire and intimacy and how those are different and how we create those with our thinking. But we also work through a lot of trauma, right? Because that always comes up, like, especially for my women whose husbands have been dealing with pornography or have had affairs, vice versa, right?
Mhm.
Where they're really struggling with their self-worth. And so we do a lot with building up, I like to call it godly confidence. I think of it as different from the world. And it's just how we can become more Christ-like by recognizing our worth and how nothing can touch that. And so even our spouse's pornography will never affect our worth. And then we learn about conditional love and unconditional love and how boundaries are what allow us to love somebody unconditionally. So if one of my spouses ends up getting a divorce, like the two spouses end up divorcing, they learn how to love themselves through the whole process, work on loving their spouse through the whole process, but then having their boundaries as what protects them and having them separate more amicably instead of like this huge heated blown up thing.
Okay, so you, on many levels, I can, if I want to work on my marriage and I want to save it or whatever, you're great. And also, if I kind of know what's happening, you're like what is the word? You can coach through the process. An amicable divorce is thousands and thousands of dollars less expensive than a heated, angry divorce, for sure. But you touched on so many things. I didn't give you a heads up on these because I didn't know until you said it, but I really would love to have a quick discussion about a couple of these things. We'll start with this one first. You said we build up the godly confidence, or I can, like, the humble pride, is what I like to call it. It's just, so you're confident, sure of yourself, but you're not cocky, and but how do you retain that when what your spouse is doing seems like they don't like who you are? Like, for instance, with pornography, so many women make it about themselves. I'm not pretty enough. I'm not sexy enough. I've had a baby, so he doesn't want to look at me anymore. Whatever it may be. And it's never about them, right?
Yeah, I mean, it's not our stretch marks. It's not our stretched out flabby skin. It's not the tire around our waist. It's not how elevated our boobs are, right? Like those
none
are
of that.
no. And so part of the model that I teach and the coaching is that we have circumstances, right?
Mhm.
And the way our body looks is going to be like our spouse's circumstance, right?
Mhm.
And so me having a baby might be Parker's circumstance, or like my stretch marks might be Parker's circumstance, but it's going to be Parker's thoughts about those things that create his experience. My experience is going to be separate from his experience. I know that sounds like counterintuitive because you're like, no, together we're one. We're like, his experience is my experience. We share everything. But it's actually really important to untangle ourselves from our spouse and kind of like release that codependency.
Yes.
It's not saying that we can't love each other, that we can't support each other and everything, but all it is a way of breaking free and being like, okay, like and here's just an example from my own marriage. Like I was very self-conscious. Like I have stretch marks like all over my thighs. I've had them since I was in middle school. I was worried that like my husband wasn't going to think I was pretty enough. And I had all these thoughts about my stretch marks that created my experience.
Mm-hmm.
But my husband's experience was like completely different than mine. He doesn't think that stretch marks are ugly. He doesn't care about them. He sees me in a completely different light. And so that's how like he can be attracted to me. And I'm looking at myself in the mirror having a terrible self-esteem day.
Yeah.
Right. And so when we recognize that, then we can understand like our husband is we don't control them. We
What,
can't.
really?
Right? Like,
But we
right?
want to. We think
We
life
want
would be
to,
so much
right?
easier if they will just do ABC.
Yeah. If I have my hair the certain way, if I have the best tan or I get the spray tan and it covers them up, you know, all those thoughts, like, then I will be worthy enough. Then they'll think I'm good enough, right? But all we are is making ourselves miserable and disrespecting ourselves because we create our own experience of ourselves, right? So I have my own thoughts about my stretch marks, and I have the option of choosing to think stretch marks are ugly, or I have the option to think stretch marks are a part of the human body. It shows that I grew. Right. And I don't even have to get to like, I love my stretch marks. I think they're the sexiest thing ever. All I have to do is get to a neutral place where they don't bother me and I don't think about them. And that right there alone won't interfere then when my husband's attracted to me, when we're together and all those things. I don't have to be thinking all these self-conscious thoughts. I can just be present and enjoying the experience.
I love that. So it's, yeah, boundaries go along with the idea of there's balance, because when you come together, husband, wife, you do want the connectiveness. You're a unit, you're a team, you're all of these things. And sometimes we can get fooled into the idea that, well, that means we need to see the same on everything, but we are separate individuals too. There's so many different ways to see that. So since you touched on the model, do you want to just take some time for people that are like, model what, huh? Let's just show them how this works, because this model, and I have a very similar model in my manifestation model module in my self-hypnosis course, because we can correct 90% of our issues just using this model. And while you write this, set it up, I'm just going to explain why. So we have life, right? Life happens all the time. It's what we decide to think about life. All the circumstances, the facts of life are neutral. They're always neutral. And that's the circumstances. And then what makes them hurt or feel good or right or wrong, good or bad, is just what we think. And so as long as it's not a subconscious program that's so ingrained that it comes up automatically, and that's the other 10%, then you can come and see me. We'll do some hypnosis and let's pull that out and correct it. But for 90% of the issues, what Lindsay has is going to be beneficial. So right now, get your piece of paper, your pen, take some notes. Let's learn this, because a lot of the stuff you can do on your own, but when you get stuck and you're not able to see it clearly, when it's so big, having a coach or a therapist can really be beneficial. Okay. All that being said, take it away, Lindsay. Tell us what this is all about.
Okay. So this is the model, and this literally is like, this saved my marriage. And it saved it because it was able to help me separate my thoughts from my husband's thoughts. And it helped me find or re-empower myself.
Yeah.
Because I had like intermeshed and created all of these messy stories that had woven around my thoughts and my feelings and how I was showing up in the world and how I was interacting with my spouse, right? Like, because I was like, oh, I'm not good enough. Like my husband doesn't think I'm pretty enough. So then I ended up having an affair because I thought, oh, this man thinks I'm pretty enough. He thinks I'm good enough, right? Like, so that's just like how that's just like one example how certain thoughts can really just like take us down a dark path. But just to like stick with something, like we'll keep going with the stretch marks, right? Like,
Okay. Most of us women have stretch marks, and this could be, I love that you have your model and Parker's model, because that way we can all relate. Anybody in a heterosexual relationship most likely will deal with imperfections. You may not have stretch marks, or your lady might not have stretch marks, but there's something else going on. You've got crooked teeth, or you've got the wrong color hair, or you've got whatever is happening to make you feel like, oh, he would like so and so better. And thanks for doing both of these.
yeah, for sure. So like these are my stretch marks, and then for him it would be wife has stretch marks. Okay, so my thought is these are ugly. Okay, his thought is they're fine. Like he doesn't
Like it's a body.
it's a body. It's not a thing for him.
Right.
Okay? So my feeling would be self-conscious, and his feeling would be, I don't know, neutral.
Yeah, if your thought is neutral, the feeling's probably neutral.
Yeah, like he really isn't gonna like dwell on them, right? But my action is I show up like very reserved. I hold back.
Turn
like,
off the lights. I don't want you to see my body.
Yep. Turn out the lights. I complain about my body, which isn't ever attractive anyways. Like,
isn't that fun? We don't like the stretch marks. So let me point out, look here at these ugly things. So where he's maybe neutral and now he's going, you're programming him.
Yeah.
Isn't that sad? We all do it. Or well, most of us have done it.
I create stories in my head about maybe what he's thinking about them. He thinks they're ugly. He doesn't think I'm pretty enough. He's probably thinking of someone else he saw on the internet, like, right? All these different thoughts, maybe. I don't know. But I'm making this crap up. Meanwhile, he's over here just wanting to hang out, right?
Right.
So he's in a great mood. He's being complimentary.
Yeah, you're his wife, so he probably wants some naked time with your thighs and everything else.
Exactly, right?
Yeah.
And so my result is I create this story where I am actually kind of being ugly, right?
Yeah. The result is
I'm being very ugly to myself. Okay. And then I'm going to start, because I don't know about you, but when I'm feeling self-conscious, I don't like the way it makes me feel. So I start projecting on my husband. And so then I will start kind of like picking a fight.
Yeah.
Right. And or I'll like kind of be like, no, I'm not in the mood, or, or no, you
Yeah.
don't really think that, you're just saying that because you just want some. Like, I
Mhm.
will just, like, so then I kind of get a little bit ugly with my husband.
Right. You subconsciously create problems so that you don't have to be in a situation where your thighs might be exposed.
Yeah. Meanwhile, my husband is just trying to create a fun and connecting. He's just trying to get like sexy time. He's trying to connect with me. He's trying to create intimacy, you know. But that's the problem when these two worlds collide. Your spouse's thoughts and your thoughts, and he's fine, he's good, and you're feeling ugly. That's when you get the conflict, right?
Right.
You're not in the mood and he's in the mood.
Right. And then you can write a whole new model on why now Parker feels disappointed because you're projecting at him. And so this is it in a nutshell. We have our circumstances, always facts neutral. Then we think what we want to think about that. And then we feel, because we have a thought, a feeling comes up. And when we have those feelings, we show up differently. We show up in congruency with the thought and the feeling. And then
Yeah.
we have the results.
It's
So
not possible for me to get a positive result while I'm thinking this thought. It's
exactly.
going to, like, there's no other option. And if you think like, oh, well, I think these are ugly, so I go to the place to get them revised, like whatever they do to like remove
Wait, you
stretch
can
marks
remove
or
stretch
whatever.
marks?
I guess I've heard that.
Yeah.
But you like, or you like going a spray tan and stuff. That's actually a new thought that's creating a new action
Right.
and a new result. It's now like, I can fix these is gonna,
Mhm.
right?
Yeah.
So with this thought, like they are ugly, like I can't show up other than being ugly to myself and
Right.
like putting myself down and causing conflict.
Right.
So that's where it comes in, where you really create your life, and it's, you've created your relationship is what you think it is,
Yeah.
and your relationship is going to be what you think of yourself.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I love how you explained all of that. And I'll just touch on the action part, because I know that there are lots of women that will see this and be like, okay, CTF, we're all the same there. But then they might be saying, like, if they're like me, I I would still show up and do the things for my husband, because I was conditioned like you with the therapy, that it's my job to please my husband. And I know that when I please my husband, he's a lot nicer. And so the house is easier to live in. However, when I'm faking it like that, then there's a whole other model where I'm building resentment because I'm doing something I don't actually want to do. So there's a
Absolutely. And
whole lot of ways that it can go
yeah,
sideways
it
with
comes up
the thought.
all the time where my wives resent the husband, and the husband's like, I don't
Right.
know like what went wrong, like I don't
Right.
know how
I
I
just
did all
want
these
to
things.
love.
She could have said no
Yeah.
instead of, right? But, and this sounds very harsh, but when you do stuff like that, when you try to control your spouse's happiness by doing things that cause resentment with you, that is a form of manipulation.
Mhm.
And like, you might not think, oh, I'm a total manipulator, but I remember doing all of these things to try to control my husband's mood, where it was like, I wanted to make sure dinner was good, and I wanted to make sure the house was clean when he got home, and that the children weren't fighting and being naughty and that they were good in public, and so that
Mhm.
my husband didn't get like upset. And it's not that my husband's a bad person, he's a human being, right? And like, so for me, I'm like, I'm getting upset with my kids, but I'm not allowing him to get upset with my kids. So I'm trying to control him, or like I'm trying to make him think that I'm so attractive by doing all these things to my body. I'm not doing them for myself. I'm doing them because I want everybody else to think that I'm like a movie star or
Right.
whatever, like an Instagram influencer. So,
Appearances. We want to keep up
yeah,
the
we're trying to
appearances.
keep up all these
Yeah.
appearances. And like I said, I'm not doing it for myself. So in the long run, I'm building resentment. And I'm also knocking down my self-confidence every single time I do that.
Yeah.
So when I don't show up for myself, when I don't like respect myself, I take my confidence down a notch every single time, because then eventually I'm in conflict, and the person that I really am resenting is myself, but I'm projecting it onto everybody else. And then you get rock bottom and you're like, how did I even get here? Which is what happened with me and my affair. Like, how did I even get here? I have all this resentment for all these people. And now I have to look at it and be like, no, I resent myself.
Okay. So I want, I want everyone to pause and take a breath and think about where you're at right now. If you have resentment, if you have resentment towards your spouse, what are the chances that we are blind to what we're doing ourselves? Because how many clients have you had that come in? They're like, I'm not doing anything wrong. I'm being so nice. I'm doing da, 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 da. And they're resenting the relationship for all these things. But when we're acting on a subconscious level, we don't realize how these damaging thoughts then damage our relationships. So there's a key right there. If you're feeling resentment towards your spouse, take it back and see where you're actually resenting yourself or what you're doing. Or if that sounds like, well, I'm not doing it, then get in contact with Lindsay and she'll show you.
Bring awareness.
Yes, it is. It's hard. It's a tough pill to swallow when you realize, oh man, it's me. I have to take responsibility for me. But when you do take responsibility for you, that means you have the power for your own happiness. You don't have to wait for you. Just like we can't make our spouse happy, they can't make us happy. We have to show up happy and then let everything fall into place. So now that we've seen all of this model, how would and Parker's fine, so we don't even have to change him. How would we get to a better model with ourselves?
So one of the things that like you probably talk to your clients about a lot is how our brains know when we're lying to it, right? It's
Yeah.
like a toddler at the store, and it's like, oh crap, I know you're not going to give me that sucker before dinner. Like, why are you telling me that you are, right? And so like they're holding on to that sucker, and you're like, I promise, like I'll give it to you here at this time. And they're like, no, I'm gonna hold on to it. And so you have to kind of like swap out, right? You like trade your toddler out something, you trade your brain out something. And it's like, my favorite go-to is, it's possible that these stretch marks actually aren't ugly. Like, it's possible that it's just because my body grew, and that's what my skin did, and that's how bodies work. And so then my brain, I switch it into, instead of defensive mode, I'm switching it into curious mode by putting
Yes.
in it's possible. And then they're like, well, is it possible? Because, right, we have confirmation bias. When I'm in defensive mode, I'm looking for all of the reasons why. My brain's just automatically doing the data download of why they are ugly and how Kim Kardashian doesn't have any. And so, right, like they, but if I can then think it's possible these aren't ugly, it's possible this is just how human bodies work, then my brain's going to start downloading how it's possible that these aren't ugly and it's just the natural human body. So then when I think that, then I'm starting to heal, right? And I just keep flipping back to that. If I show up and I'm worried, I mean, my husband's kissing on my thighs or something, and I get like self-conscious, if I think it's possible these aren't ugly and it's just how the body works, then I can start getting into neutral mode. Okay. And then from neutral mode, I'm working up the ladder, the emotional ladder. Then if I want to, I can stop in neutral mode, or I can work on like these are my warrior stripes. Like, I was a pregnant mom and I carried my baby. Like, I'm a freaking awesome person,
Yeah.
And like, then I might that might make me kick me into feeling like sexy, right? And then I'm going to show up a completely different way.
Yeah.
But it's just getting yourself to let go when it wants to hold firm and start trading it out, right? Like, so maybe it's like, okay, here's the sucker. Well, here's one of those little like fruit pouches for the toddler that we're just swapping it out for. And then we're going to swap it out for like a carrot stick, right?
Yeah.
Like, we're just working our
Baby
way up
steps.
the emotional ladder in baby steps, because our brain will dig in if you lie to it. And that's why when you're like, I'm going to go and I'm going to do all these affirmations every single day in the mirror, and you feel like an idiot.
Yeah.
I am brave. I am bold. I am, and you're
I am
just
a
like,
liar.
yeah. And you're like, my body is the hardest thing on the planet. Like, and then you're like, your brain in the background is like, nope, nope, no.
And that, yes, well, one of the things I teach, if you haven't heard this, you can go back to my first training video, conscious mind versus subconscious mind, for those of you watching. But we literally have a barrier in our brain called the reticular activating system, or in hypnotherapy, we call it the critical factor filter. If there is something, and it doesn't, lies are relative, truth and lies are relative to what we believe, right? But if what we have in our subconscious mind is not congruent with what you're putting in, like the affirmations, my thighs are sexy, and in here you say you have the belief that they're ugly because of the stretch marks, you're just going to bounce out those affirmations. They're not helpful, because now, on top of not believing it, now you have the new story of, I'm a liar, and liars aren't good. So I love how you touched on the baby steps moving forward, finding something that you can believe. Maybe they're just there, finding a place to neutral, and then moving to the place where, well, maybe I don't have to love these, but thank goodness Parker thinks my legs are sexy, or whatever. And then I have definitely felt myself in my marriage where I can look at my body in the mirror, and like you said, I can make a list of every single flaw, but I also see the way my husband looks at me. And so I can show up confident for him. And my thought is that he thinks I'm sexy no matter what. And it feels good. And so then I show up sexy. Isn't that fun?
Yep. And and how this can work also, like, outside of like body image issues, right? Like, because there are going to be people who are like, well, my spouse doesn't think it's neutral, my spouse
Right.
does think it's ugly, right? And then that's where you take ownership of yours and you separate and you let them have ownership of theirs, and then you create your own thoughts. Like, you might have the thought like, my husband doesn't appreciate my stretch marks, but it's possible that I can appreciate them.
Yeah.
Or something like, if it was like this situation and we redid his model to like, now like she doesn't like me, she doesn't want to connect with me, she doesn't whatever, right? Like, I've pushed my husband away because of my own insecurities. Now he's going to become insecure possibly, and he might switch out his thought. My wife doesn't want to have sex, right? And so his thought is like, she's not attracted to me. And then all of a sudden, boom, he's there. But instead, it's not for him. He could think it's possible that it has nothing to do with me. It's possible her mood has nothing to do with me. It's possible his mood has nothing to do with me. Right? And then, like, when you think it's possible his mood has nothing to do with me, you're going to be more willing to not feel defensive, and you're going to be more willing to be like, hey, babe, what's the matter?
Yeah.
And that's going to open you up to dialogue, because when you're stuck in defensive mode, your communication is going to suck. But if you can open yourself up to curious mode, then you're going to be able to have more of a dialogue with your spouse. And then he could ask me, what's wrong? And I'd be like, I'm just feeling really self-conscious. And that is the opportunity to build intimacy right there, right? We're not having sex, we're building intimacy, where I can be like, I'm feeling really self-conscious about my thighs. And like, I might get upset, I might cry, I might do whatever, but I'm working through that with him, and he can now like talk to me about it, and we can share our thoughts together, right?
Yeah.
At the end of the day, it's still like my thinking and his thinking, but we can share that experience, and that's where we come together.
I have
Oh
a
my God,
mustache.
you threw a mic. Yeah. Right?
What's doing, mommy?
Yep.
Yeah, I love that. And I will validate what you said. When you're thinking it's possible it has nothing to do with me, that is almost always true. Even if your spouse is saying it's your fault, you have to remember that they might have an ugly model. And so they are now projecting it on you, just like you were showing in your first model, how you would project that onto your husband when it wasn't about him at all. It's all your own issues. And I see that all the time. I'm sure you do too, where even when they're mean or trying to be controlling or whatever behavior, it's almost always because they haven't cleaned up their own models. They don't even know their models exist.
Yeah, they have no awareness around it. It's just subconscious programming for them.
And that's why actually, because you touched on before, where you can come in as a couple if you're both on board, or if your spouse isn't on board, it's still very valuable to have your own coaching or therapy, because then you're aware. The simple awareness that, oh, okay, I understand I have models. And so of course my spouse does too. And I'm going to give him grace and space to work on his while setting up my own boundaries. Like you're saying, the boundaries are so important. We have, Tara Brock talks about this, came from somebody else, but I don't remember who, but she talks about having a strong back and a soft belly. And so that to me says we have our boundaries, but we also show up with love and forgiveness and compassion. When we can soften our heart and our belly, or soften our front, to have compassion for understanding our spouse has their stuff just like we have our stuff. And it's also fine to hold our spine, our boundaries, so that you can navigate it together. And when somebody, okay, I know the answer here, but you tell me, when somebody comes in and is doing their own coaching with you, but they can't get their spouse to work with you together, do you still end up, usually if the couple stays together, do you see the spouse coming around and showing improvement even when they never see you?
Yep. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Because you're showing up completely different. And it might be a little alarming to your spouse at first. They're like, what is happening, right? Like, I'm not used to this.
Right. Especially with the boundaries. You're changing the dance. What's what?
Yeah. And I think that's probably one of the scariest things for like men or women when their spouse isn't doing coaching with us. is the boundary part, but the boundaries actually are the gateway to unconditional love, and unconditional love feels good. It's so loving. And I am the byproduct of coaching without my spouse ever being coached. My spouse has never been coached, and our marriage looks completely different than it ever did before. And I show up differently now. Like, I'm a trained coach, and I still don't have awareness every single day around my actions. Like, I have to do my work, right? I have to be the product of what I teach. So you're not going to get this right 100%, but this is also a good way for a wife, if she's doing it all on her own, to just have awareness around herself and to be able to realign with her own self. This empowered me, this model, so much.
Yeah.
That's what I loved about it, because then it taught me that I was not in control of my spouse. So I stopped trying to manipulate him all the time. I was unconsciously trying to manipulate him by all of my actions. And then I started showing up and loving myself. And the thing is that when you love yourself, you automatically start to love everybody else, and you will take them as who they are, and you will give them grace, and you will be curious, and you'll be empathetic. Now, if you're being hard on yourself, you will not give that to other people as much, unless you're people pleasing and you're building resentment, and that's fake, right? True, genuine confidence is going to create unconditional love.
Absolutely.
Don't need your spouse to do it.
Right. Our core belief system, our morals are the same for us and for them, whether it's our spouse or our kids or the world around us. They're going to be congruent, even if you don't think it. So, and it can chicken and the egg, right? You can start by loving outside of you and give yourself permission to love because you love others. And the more you love yourself, the more you love others. And then it flows. You have the flow back and forth. But that awareness piece, that's, if you're not familiar with my 4 A's, like that, the circumstance and the thoughts, all of this is just the awareness piece, getting us to be like, oh my gosh, I do have, okay, this is simple, because everybody can write this down. Everybody can do one circumstance at a time and start to see things clearly if we're open to it. Now, I have worked with a lot of people with the model, and they're just like, there is no way else to feel about this. This feeling is appropriate. And and sometimes it is appropriate to feel anger, sadness, all of the things. And then we look at how we want to think about the anger, the sadness, and move through. So it can go from the top or the bottom or anywhere in between, right? If you're stuck on, well, I don't even know the circumstances, but I know that I am showing up this way. This is the result I don't want. And usually most people think, okay, to get a different result, we have to do something different, right? And it always goes up above that.
Yeah, and I've coached clients before where we did a model and their thought was creating like a feeling that was not conducive to helping their marriage thrive. And like, as we brought awareness around it, and we kept talking about it, they were like, I can't see this any other way. And it clicked for me that I was like, I'm not trying to force you to change. My job as a coach is to show you the result you're creating. And then it's optional if you want to keep this or not. There are times I have done models in my head where I am mad at Parker, and I can go through the whole entire thing and I could create totally different results for myself. And I choose to stay mad.
Yeah, me too.
And I work through that, and we talk it out and everything. Like, the model isn't something you should ever use against yourself to like try to make yourself feel a different way, right? Like, if you put in the circumstance like marital or physical abuse in marriage, my thought is like, I don't deserve this, and it creates anger that is going to show up as actions in your thought line. And that might be that little piece, that action piece that helps you create boundaries and that
Right.
helps you decide, I will not stay in this marriage. I will not tolerate this. I am leaving. And then your result is like whatever you've created, like, I'm getting
Yeah.
out of this, right? But that's just one way that that could go.
I'm really glad you touched on that, because so many of us think when we go into therapy or coaching that we just want things to be happy and flowers and roses all the time. And that's really not what it's about. It's about
No.
recognizing where we have choice and what is most beneficial. If somebody's physically, mentally, sexually abusing you, you don't want to feel good about that. That's not
No,
helpful at all. So
that's
so it's just that awareness piece to show you a little bit more of a clear picture, and then you can go be curious about, why am I feeling this way? Is this how I want to feel? Is this helpful? Is this going to, what trajectory path is that going to lead me down? So I'm really glad that we just packed so much into this call, and I'm so grateful, and I hope everybody has thoroughly enjoyed this. If because this can be confusing when you first see it, so if there are questions, please go ahead and post them in the comments. But before I let you go, Lindsay, I would love for you to share one piece of the most beneficial advice that you can give to somebody who is struggling in their relationship. They actually do want to make it better, and they're just stuck on the how part. What advice would you give to them?
my favorite question would be to ask myself, what am I making it mean?
Mm,
When my spouse does something that irritates me, that hurts me, that does whatever, or vice versa, like I do something and blah, 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 right? Like, what am I making it mean? And that question opens you up for curiosity for yourself, opens it up for that, because most likely you're making it mean that they don't respect you, they don't love you, they don't see your value, they don't appreciate you, whatever, all the different
yeah.
things. And understanding that life is 50-50, our relationships are 50-50, like that is not optional. Like, you can do the work, you can work very hard on trying to make yourself happy all the time, but we were created to have positive and negative emotions. And that 50-50 is very key to understanding that, like, what you're experiencing, like that emotion about your thoughts, about whatever your circumstances, that's part of who you are as a human, right?
Yeah.
We don't get to always control our circumstances, right? Like, some we
Right.
do. Some we do. Like, if I live in Utah, I can control if I move to California or whatever. I have
Right.
control over some of my circumstances. But some circumstances we don't, right? I have stage 4 cancer. I don't really. But like, I got the news that I have stage
Right.
4 cancer. Like, that is no longer in my control, but I always have control over my experience. And this is the piece that always gives me control over my experience, right? My husband comes home and hits me when he's drunk. Like, now that's my circumstance. I didn't have, like, he hit me, that became my circumstance. Now I have whatever my thoughts are, but now I'm going to create my experience. Now I'm going to create whether like I get out. Now that might right? Like we're all intermeshed.
Right.
And so you can't control what he does based off of your things, but you start taking back ownership of your experiences. You can control whether you just say, all right, peace out, stage 4 cancer, bye to everybody, write a will, like I'm dead. Or you could decide, well, I'm going to try all these different things. I'm going to fight like hell, like those are two totally different experiences, and not like one's not wrong and one's not right.
Right. Yeah.
It's just like, what's good for you? What do you want to do with the result of your life? How do you want to create your life?
So what I'm hearing is, number one, learn how to ask the questions before reacting. What am I making this mean? And usually it's, what am I making this mean about me in my head? And then being okay with life doesn't have to be 100% wonderful. In fact, we learn more from the downtimes, and they make the good times so much better. So being okay. And third, because you're an overachiever, you're going to get free, knowing that you have the power to make your experience anything you want. Is that right?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yep.
Well, that is some amazing advice that we can all take in, whether we're in a relationship or not. So thank you for that. Thank you so much for coming on the show. And lastly, if somebody wants to reach out and work with you, Lindsay, where can they find you? And we're going to put it in the show notes too.
Okay. So like lindsaycluff.com. It's LINDSAY.
Okay.
And then Cluff, CLUFF.com, or my Instagram is at Live Coaching with Linz. And those are probably the best ways to get in touch with me. But I'm also happy to answer questions too. You send me a DM or anything if you're curious. So yeah.
Well, that's perfect. You can if you're ready to jump in, go reach out, send her a DM. If you're still curious and want to see more, find her on Instagram and hear what she has to say. And you'll know when you're ready. You'll know when you're ready to move forward. Remember, it's your life, your choice, what you get to feel and experience. It's your experience. If you don't like what you're experiencing, you get to change it. So, and Lindsay can help you. Thanks so much. And you guys all come back and see us again, and have a great day.
Bye.